Hey Trek friends, we're back from hiatus. Today we're going to tackle some possibly controversial episodes that most people think are wonderful, and I'm only putting here an upper middle of the road status. Welcome back to Best of Trek, Worst of Trek. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. Starting us off today at number 334, New Bonds, or Light and Shadows. What would an episode of Discovery be without starting with exposition that would be better shown than told to the audience? In one of the two plots going on, a time anomaly opens right in front of Discovery in what feels like a big ball of filler. But it does give Pike and Tyler a chance to bond after a lot of angst between them in the season. Meanwhile, Burnham is trying to find answers to why Spock is accused of murder, and it leads her home to Vulcan, where she finds her stepmom Amanda sheltering a mentally broken Spock. We've seen Spock portrayed in all kinds of ways through the franchise, but this not with it Spock is fascinating to watch. Sarek figures out what's going on and gives Spock over to Section 31 despite everyone's wishes. Michael goes with him, and Georgiou convinces her to escape with Spock before they lobotomize him. This culminates in Spock seemingly taking them into a black hole, but it sets up the next episode going back to Talos really well. One of the better Season 2 episodes that sets up the rest of its arc. Displacing Locals at 333. Eminent Domain. Or Progress. Here we have a better retread of the Ensigns of Command, as Kira is tasked with removing 3 holdouts from a Bajoran moon they're going to mine for energy purposes. You'd think the Federation could hook them up with some fusion generators or something, but that wouldn't make for a good ethical dilemma. She starts feeling for this one old gentleman that's been stranded here for many years of the Cardassian occupation, and refuses to leave the something from nothing he and 2 others have built. Kira helps him stay in his home at first, but in the end does her unfortunate duty and just torches the guy's house to force him out. This is one of the most ethically questionable episodes of Trek, and I really want to feel for this guy in the end, but the needs of the many and all that. A good exploration of problems that face our modern society. Gaining more responsibilities at 332, another Pip. Or The Adversary. The Cisco earns a well-deserved promotion to captain in this one, and is then tasked with checking in on the Zenkethi after a change in authoritarian government by a Federation ambassador. Turns out it's a ruse, and the ambassador is a changeling trying to stir up trouble in the Alpha Quadrant, and locks them on a course for that homeworld. The episode becomes a fun game of find the changeling. At one point, Cisco orders no one to be left alone, and literally 5 minutes later, everyone has lost their buddy. Despite pretty much every system not being under their control, Cisco is able to engage the self-destruct in an effort to stave off war. In the end, there's a whole thing about no changeling has ever harmed another, and while this changeling does offer to leave the ship with Odo, he's perfectly content to let him die. And when Odo kills the other changeling, it somehow becomes his fault for the rest of the series that he's harmed another. This is an action-packed, fun hour of television, but it has a couple of things that don't make sense and bring this season finale down a few notches. Higgs boson, eat your heart out at 331, The God Particle. Or The Omega Directive. Voyager is stopped in its tracks when sensors detect the presence of the elusive Omega molecule that only Kathy and Seven know about, and Janeway decides it's up to her to undertake alone a mission that would be for a team of specialists in the Alpha Quadrant. Turns out a single molecule of this stuff can destabilize subspace across light years and make warp travel impossible. To Seven, though, it's a deity to be respected, as it represents the ultimate symbol of order to chaos. Miss of Nine's priorities clash with Kate's, but provide another opportunity for their bond to grow stronger through this crisis, and culminating in a discussion about the nature of faith and science in Da Vinci's workshop. This is a really unique story, and a distinctly Star Trek one at that. Number 330 is a blast from the past in Nostalgia Remembered, or Relics. Literally out of nowhere, the Enterprise discovers a wall in space, with a Federation distress call emanating from the surface. What they find is a crashed Federation passenger ship with the pattern of OG Enterprise's chief engineer Scotty trapped in the buffer. The question then becomes, was the other pattern lost of someone named Franklin the little alien sidekick that follows Scotty around in the JJ Trek movies? We spend most of the rest of the runtime having Geordi be an uncharacteristic jerk to one of the most important engineers in Starfleet history, and Scotty taking an extended trip down memory lane, reminding us of all the cool missions the TOS crew went through. This episode is a ton of fun, and the addition of the theoretical Dyson sphere cement this as a solid episode of Trek. I think it would rank higher if Geordi were nicer and there was slightly less nostalgia. Striving for individuality at 329, collective within a collective. In a short intro, we learn Seven was on a Borg vessel that crashed once with 3 other survivors. Apparently, when their link to the collective was severed, the other survivors started remembering their lives before being Borg, and Seven, the literal Borg poster child, couldn't have that. So she created another Borg link between the 3. Only, once they eventually escape the collective, they find that they're still linked and come after Seven to try and reverse the process. While a way is found in the end to unlink them, it means shortening their lives to only a few weeks. But they would rather live weeks as individuals than life as a mini collective. It's nice to see not Admiral Forrest in one of his many roles across the franchise. This one's a pretty good thriller for Seven, though it takes quite a lot of time to get to its point. A little dull, but a good episode. Setting up things to come at 328, beginning of the end. Or Penumbra. This episode starts the final march towards the DS9 series finale. The Cisco buys land on Bajor he'll never get to utilize. The running joke about Captain Baudet the Galamite makes its final appearance. And Worf has been lost after a battle near the Badlands. And Esri steals a runabout hoping to find an escape pod with him in it. If anyone thought it was odd that the runabout's name is Gander and not a great river of Earth, it's because it was originally written and recorded as the Ganges, but producers only remembered after it was too late that ship was destroyed, and had the actors overdub their lines. We find out about the disease killing the founders, and Dukat shows back up on Cardassia looking for cosmetic surgery to continue spreading the good word of the pirates. Esri, in an implausible set of circumstances, does find Worf, adrift in an escape pod for days, only to have their runabout destroyed by the Jem'Hadar, and spend a romantic evening together reminiscing over Dax's past life. In the end, they're captured by the Breen and discover the new alliance between them and the Dominion. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this episode, but it is all set up for what's to come, and so finds a home about here on the list. Walking a mile and then some in someone else's shoes is number 327, Shades of Beige, or The Inner Light. I'm going to skip the normal recap on this episode and just ask a series of questions. Why are all the doorways hobbit size and don't reach the height of the people that live here and walk through them without ducking? Why is everything a hideous shade of beige? Why does Picard look older in age makeup than he does in real life now? Why is Patrick Stewart so awkward at eating soup? Why do I laugh every time at what should be a traumatic moment as Picard's faux wife dies and her last words are, "Put your shoes away"? How do a planet that are only just starting to send up small missiles have the tech to send a psionic device far enough into space to clear a star-going nova and make it into interstellar space in 1,000 years? Why does the device only affect Picard and not everyone on the crew? If it does only affect one person, why not a random lower decks red shirt? Would the ending have been better if Riker brought his trombone for a jam session when he delivers the flute to Picard? While I do enjoy how this sets up what I call the Picard is human arc, the idea of a random probe forcing someone to endure decades of someone else's mediocre life just doesn't sit well with me on top of the questions I've already laid out. Though this episode won a Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation. Number 326 brings war crimes against itself in Self-Incrimination, or Duet. This is another one that I don't fully agree with the bulk of the fandom about. A sickly Cardassian passenger comes to DS9 and Kira immediately has him locked up, because she knows he could have only contracted the disease he has by being part of a brutal forced labor camp during the occupation. This sets up a whole game of deception that does uncover a bunch of Bajoran history and backstory of the occupation. But I just don't feel sorry for this guy pretending to be the leader of the camp in question, just so he can self-sacrifice himself in the name of justice. Even though Kira was ready to convict him for simply being a file clerk there in the beginning, which he was, and is ultimately haunted by his death in the end, this guy's pain and grief just don't translate with me the way it does for others. A good episode, but not as moving as other rankings would indicate.
Computer.
That program is available.
Thanks, Major. Major. Thanks, Major. Major.
Auto-destruct sequence armed.
Thanks, Major.
Auto-destruct in 6 minutes.
Major.
Warp core field breach.
Thanks, Major.
Auto-destruct sequence aborted.
Thanks, Major.
The 6 starboard pods were recovered.
Thanks, Major.
Plasma flow activity ahead.
Major.
Please specify by registry number.
Thanks, Major.
Regeneration cycle complete.
Major.
Implement the Omega Directive immediately.
Thanks, Major.
Decompression in 30 seconds.
Major.
Analysis underway.
Thanks, Major.